Hello again. Bonjour. This is a short video that will basically go over the study guide. There is also a hard copy of the guide on the site in that particular section in the schedule. First question, smallpox from Cortez's men was the most devastating European disease contracted by the Aztecs. Number 2, people adapted to new foods and developed new tastes after the Columbian Exchange that we talked about in Chapter 1. 3, most New England colonists paid their own way compared to colonists in the original Jamestown colony. Puritans, in number 4, felt that their city on a hill would ultimately change the world. This is an important idea in the American political creed, the idea of being special, the idea that we are doing something new and unique, and that we are a shining light for the rest of the world to emulate. 5, Roger Williams was significant in establishing the colony of Rhode Island, what is today the state of Rhode Island. 10 million Africans were enslaved, it's estimated, and brought in the slave trade to the American colonies. 7, the French authorities tightly controlled their colonies, whereas the English practiced benign neglect or salutary neglect that we talked about in Chapter 4, I believe it was. 8, the English settlers largely experienced better lives in the colonies than in their home country. 9, a written series of resolves, tax revolt, boycotts, and destruction of Lieutenant Governor Hutchinson's home were all actions taken against the Stamp Act. If you've been doing some of the inquisitive chapter questions, you might recognize some of these. King George III was largely blamed in the Declaration of Independence. It's largely a series of complaints against the crown after the opening section of the Declaration, written by Jefferson, who replaced the dog as the main beast of burden in the Native American culture. The horse, probably the most significant overall impact on Native American society, especially in the plains, was the introduction of that animal. 12, a big reason why Native Americans lost the ability to resist European encroachment was the loss of tribal leadership from the death over or from infectious diseases. Smallpox was very deadly to Native Americans. 13, the soaring production of tobacco led to the need for more laborers in the Chesapeake Bay area. Tobacco, it can be said, made America. 14, this man prized science and reason and rejected dogmatic religious beliefs. That would be Mr. Ben Franklin. 15, white European indentured servants were the primary source of labor until the mid-17th century, when slavery replaces indentured servitude as the main source of labor. 16, after this time period, southern plantation owners shifted from, as I just mentioned, indentured servants to African slaves. 17, the Boston Massacre shocked Parliament into repealing the Townshend Acts. 18, the Glorious Revolution in Britain impacted the colonists by proving that a despised monarch could be overthrown. There was a precedent. And in the English tradition, this is very important, precedent. The British East India Company was allowed to sell tea at a greatly reduced cost, ruining colonial smuggling, and that resulted in the Boston Tea Party. 20, George Grenville believed the colonists should pay for the British troops who defended them during the war. This was British motivation for increasing taxes on the colonies in North America. 21, in 1627, the French government ordered that only Catholics could live in New France, which resulted in a number of French colonists in Canada being much lower than the number of British and Dutch colonists. 22, the British negotiated an agreement with the Native Americans and were allowed to resume the fur trade and reoccupy their frontier forts, which marked the end of Pontiac's rebellion. 23. The Virginia Assembly passed the Virginia Resolves, which claimed that the colonists could only be taxed by their elected representatives. An example of the role of colonial legislatures played in resisting British taxation. 24. When Parliament adopted taxes designed to raise revenues rather than simply regulate trade, this made what act different? That was the Sugar Act. 25. The French built closer ties with the Native Americans than the British and didn't encroach on their lands. 26. After a colony was more stable and secure, the population continuously increased despite the impact of disease, starvation, and warfare. So ends the first chapters dealing with exam number 1. Study this guide and you will have no problem on the first exam.